The next project that I'm working on outside of We Deal in Lead and outside of Runecairn. So it's a 1990s set, occult investigation TTRPG. So this is going to be inspired by stuff like Millennium, the TV series, the film Seven, Hellblazer, the Vertigo comic from the 90s. That's still going, but kind of specifically the 90s version of John Constantine, and other stuff like that. 90s serial killers, basically. So you'll play a group of investigators trying to stop the apocalypse from happening in the course of investigating serial killers running rampant across a rainy city in the northwest of the U.S. So that one's going to be really cool. That's called Midnight of the Century, and that's kind of what's going to come out next, amongst all of my other projects. So I think that'll be really good. I'm doing a lot of research for it now, watching old 90s serial killer movies and 80s serial killer stuff, like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, um, Striking Distance, just a mix of stuff. So I think it'll be good having having a mix of occult and um, like police procedurals to draw from. So I think that'll be cool, and it's going to be low on combat, which is different for me since I'm used to. I normally do like tactical stuff or more dynamic combat. So this will be interesting. It'll be very light on combat, if any. So it's navigating how to do that and what that's going to look like and what specific system I'm going to use. I have an idea already, but it's just working things like that out. And then obviously like fleshing out the different classes and backgrounds and what abilities they have. So yeah, I think that one's going to be really cool. Don't know how long it's going to be. Don't know what kind of format it's going to be. I think that'll come along with when I actually start writing and when it starts taking shape a bit more. Right now, it's just in the outline and development stage, so it could look totally different when it's eventually out. But I think I'm focusing in more on what I want to do with it, and what I kind of want to play around with. So I think it'll be interesting. There's going to be, because it's an investigation, um, like the core focus is investigation. I have to figure out how to properly implement that. There's a couple of examples that I'm pulling from. So something like Brindlewood Bay, which uses an open-ended investigation system where there's no set answer. It's the answer is determined at the table, when you gather all your clues and your suspects and your locations, and you try and figure out what happened in the individual mystery. There's no set answer. It's not like this person's the killer. It's it's the story that you tell together at the table. So that's one side of it. Like that's kind of one extreme where there's uh, no bespoke mystery. It's what's generated at the table using existing clues and using existing suspects, and it's just kind of what you mix up and then kind of get hopefully a satisfying story at the end of it. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other is having totally bespoke and scripted and planned out um, investigations. So you've got a serial killer, or you've got a killer, you've got victims, you've got clues that all point together, that all lead, that all kind of tying together makes sense. You've got locations. So um, having that fully detailed and fully written out, um, so that there is one singular answer to say, yes, this is the killer, this is why they did it, or this is kind of their individual motivation for doing it. These are the victims. This is the sequence of events, and it'll be the same outcome potentially for every group that plays it, or at least it'll be the same killer for every group. So those are kind of the two poles that I'm working between at the moment. One is more scripted and open-ended, or non-scripted and open-ended, where it's collaborative and narrative. And then the other where it's like, no, these are the pieces that fit together to say, yes, this is the killer and they did it for this reason. I'm leaning more towards having it be a bit more bespoke rather than free-flowing in narrative, because I think that if I was playing, that's what I would find more engaging and more enjoyable. To say, yeah, okay, well, it makes sense. So the pieces fit together like this, so this must be the killer, and then it is. And then that leaves you room for doing stuff like subverting expectations, saying, okay, well, people are going to think it's this because of all these things, but throw a monkey wrench into it, and it's actually there's this other external thing that's impacting, that's affecting behaviors and stuff like that. So I think that's probably the approach I'm going to take, having it be a bit more bespoke. But of course, having bespoke mysteries like that and investigations is more work. It's more writing. It's more like testing potentially to say, does it make sense? Do these things fit together well? Sometimes it doesn't need to make sense. Like that's one of the core themes of Millennium, which is kind of the central to this idea, is that like sometimes the world is just chaos and there's no rhyme or reason to why people do things. So I think that'll be an interesting approach using that, because it's a game where I'm planning to have different stages to it. Like there's going to be different clocks, essentially, like doom clocks. So within an investigation, there's going to be doom clocks. So there's going to be things that happen after the investigators hit a certain milestone, or after every visits or X amount of visits to different locations, then that'll tick over. So something else will happen that'll escalate things. So there'll be an internal mystery doom clock. Well, there's also going to be a world doom clock. So if there's a longer campaign, then things are going to start changing in the world as the campaign goes on. So your relationships with your consultants, like the people that help you solve the mysteries or solve the murders, your relationships with them are going to change, and the structures are going to change, like the law enforcement structures are going to change. So it's going to be like the game's going to get different as it goes on. So Jonesy says, I'm mostly familiar with Alice's Missing in regards to more investigative play. Yeah, there's a lot of cool like investigation-focused games. Like Gumshoe is another one that's like that I'm looking at as something to take inspiration from. I'm not too familiar with Alice's Missing. I know there's like clues, and it's done via text, and you can have different relationships with people, and it's not preset, but you can. I wonder if it's more similar to Brindlewood Bay in that it's a bit open-ended, where there's different potential outcomes for what happened to Alice. And then so that's another one that's potentially that's another investigative game. And like I also have to think about how do people find clues, like Gumshoe, for instance. If you're in the right place and you have the right thing on you, or you know how you have the right skill, then you just find the clue. The GM will just tell you the clue. You don't have to roll for it. And I think that's closer to what I'm going to do. Like I don't want to have, a trained investigator turn up to a crime scene and not be able to find the clue, because that'll just bring everything to a stop. So as long as you have the right background, or if you have the right item on you, or the right skill, then you'll find the clues, and it's down to you to interpret what they mean and put them together. You can potentially, playing with the idea of like pushing a search, so then you would actually roll. That would be a risk to using one of your abilities. There'd be a risk to doing that, whether it causes something like there's either a cost to it or a risk of losing something, to push things forward rather than just kind of relying on what you innately pick up. So I think that's what I'm planning on doing. Having it like, because the investigators will have different backgrounds, and that'll bring with them, like, they'll have different equipment that they have, or different knowledge and skills, and they can use that knowledge as in your inventory, as an inventory item essentially, and say, oh, okay, I'm gonna like I'm able to read the room, so I'm able to like pick up psychic impressions from the room, and if you push that a bit further, then you might be able to get a bit more information, but there's a risk that you can let something into your mind, or you can open your mind up a bit too much and bring in too much trauma, and so that'll damage you in some way, or you'll lose some of your ability scores, as in like, which would function as essentially hit points. So that kind of thing, like you can try and push an investigation, but at a risk to yourself or to people around you. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to play with there. And then having the different, I'm looking forward to having it be set in the 90s, like the late 90s. So essentially it's going to be like 96 to 98 or 99 in that era or that area of time. So I think that'll be, because obviously I lived through that, so I'll be able to bring a lot of like personal history into it, and say like, oh, these were the types of computer interfaces that I used back then, and this is like the type of technology that we had back then. So Jonesy asks, is there a good medium between a more bespoke mystery and a more player generated one? Yeah, I think so. I think potentially, like, I'm gonna try and leave a lot of room, a lot of gaps, in explanations, so that the clues, or like the bespoke investigation will point to a certain killer, but it might be that the players will come up with the killer's motivation, or try and find the external influences that are happening, because it's going to be an occult game as well. So there's like otherworldly beings that are influencing things. So angels or demons or whatever they are. So having it be like having a few things that are set in stone and bespoke, so that it makes sense and it's like a satisfying conclusion. But also having it be that it's up to interpretation exactly what's happening here, who's involved, and what the motivation is, like what's the killer's motivation for this, and like how does that fit into the rest of the world. So I think finding that line between those two, I think is going to be really good. So yeah, so on the ones, so what I'm looking at now is like mechanics, and the investigation framework and that sort of thing. And then once I've got a good grasp on that, then I can look at theming and setting, and looking at the aesthetics of it. So I think that's going to be really fun too, like when I do layout and stuff like that, like trying to bring in a bit more evocative layout and of its time, like the title sequence for Seven, for instance, the film. It's all scratchy, and it's the killer writing in their notebook, and like having like really bizarre and grotesque images and stuff like that. So pulling some of that in, but not being overwhelming, and like kind of a mix of like um, like documentation, like paperwork, like law enforcement paperwork, and like government paperwork, but also like having like occult symbols and that sort of thing. So, put like potentially in a world similar to like Dresden Files, where like magic is a known thing, but not having it be that. Like I want magic. I want it to be like a low magic situation where magic exists, but no one really knows how it works. Jonesy says Twin Peaks. Yeah, that's definitely that's another one of my major touchstones is Twin Peaks, where it's like mundane mix of mundane and occult, and like Americana, that sort of thing. So whereas like Twin Peaks looks back to like the 50s, then this is kind of going to look back to the 90s in a similar way, which is interesting because Twin Peaks was obviously early 90s. So yeah, having like having a mix of aesthetics that don't overwhelm it. So like aesthetics that support the game instead of overwhelming it. Instead of it just being like that 90s game, being it like having it be integral and supporting. So I think that's going to be interesting too. Get some water. Yeah, one of the investigator archetypes that I'm using is Agent Cooper from Twin Peaks. So I'm building an archetype from that. So, like someone who potentially sees things through dreams. I know that's in Brindlewood Bay. That's one of the archetypes is like an Agent Cooper style. Not necessarily dreams, but like can see things that other people can't see and tap into different things. So I want to have about 4 to 6 different archetypes. So you'll have stuff like the homicide detective who's investigating serial killers. So one of my other touchstones is Homicide, Life on the Street from the early 90s or from the 90s, set in Baltimore. So having like a homicide detective as an investigator archetype, and then obviously, yeah, Blue Velvet definitely. It's interesting that like Twin Peaks is kind of what the result of Blue Velvet, like David Lynch, his work on Blue Velvet. I can't help but see that definitely led to Twin Peaks. It was like a step along the way. Yeah, so like Frank Black from Millennium is one of the core archetypes. So an FBI investigator who can tap in and like tap into the criminal mind and like see what they see and see into their mind and understand, like kind of see things from their perspective. But obviously, if you do that too much, if you let your mind open too much, or if you let too much evil and trauma into your mind, then you'll pay a price for it. So that's one of the things that you'll have to balance as if you're using that investigator archetype. It's like, yeah, you can read the situation, like you can understand where a killer's coming from, but if you do that too much, then you're gonna develop a fracture. So that's another thing that I'm working on, is so like in liminal horror, which is a hack of Karen and Into the Odd, and I think one of the major touchstones for this too is liminal horror. You can get like stress in liminal horror, and that's like following on from scars in Karen, where if your HP is reduced to exactly 0, then you gain a scar because it's something that affects you. permanently. But your abilities can be increased potentially with that as well. So that kind of balancing of power versus risk kind of reminds me of Don't Rest Your Head. I'm not familiar with that one, Don't Rest Your Head. But yeah, that's absolutely, that's finding that line between like using power and like the risk that it brings. That's going to be one of the core tenets of this. Can't remember what I was talking about. Yeah, so different have different. Oh yeah, the liminal horror, and so there's like stresses that you can gain in liminal horror, which change your outlook and change how you see things. So I'm gonna use something similar to that, where you can. It's essentially like a scar, like either a physical or mental scar, like trauma that you take and you carry with you. So it would appear in your inventory, and then you can that has potential, like that brings with it potential power, but also like obviously it weighs you down and you carry it with you. So it just like with other odd like games, you can't carry too much because it'll weigh you down and leave you open. So in this situation, like if you have too much trauma, then you're exposed to the to like the violent and dangerous things in the world, or your mind is exposed. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things that I'm playing around with. Um, that's it's all in my head at the moment, but I'm starting to shape it and put it down into like designing something with it. But yeah, so the main touchstones are, well, like it's going to be a hack or a inspired by liminal horror. At the theme at its core is going to be like Millennium, or that's kind of the thing that I'm building from. Like a city on the edge of apocalypse, essentially, where serial killers are running rampant, and a team of investigators has to stop that. Um, okay, so Jonesy says an older evil hat game similar to Fate, but you get supernatural powers unless you sleep. Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, there's because I want to find that balance of like risk reward, and that's kind of runs throughout Rune Cairn and We Deal in Lead, is that you can try dangerous things and you can push things, but obviously like there's a risk to it, either with fatigue or with taking damage or with like that sort of thing. Yeah, so I think highlights are it's going to be investigation, it's going to be 90 set, low combat, if any combat. I think the main damage you take is to like your mind or your spirit or psyche, that kind of thing. You'll have investigations, so there'll be a series of investigations if you're stringing together a campaign, or you can do like a one shot where you have to stop like a serial killer terrorizing the city. And then there's going to be doom clocks, individual doom clocks for the investigation, and then a larger campaign world doom clock that will cause things to happen in the world and cause relationships and structures to change. The worse things get. So yeah, I'm excited about it. It's called Midnight of the Century, and it's in development. But hopefully, I haven't decided how I'm gonna release it or how I'm gonna do it. I might do itch funding for it, like I did with We Deal in Lead. So release an alpha version on itch.io, and then as that gets funded, get more art, and then have go to an eventual print run. I think that might do that, or I might do Kickstarter or crowdfunding, like backer kit, if if it comes together quicker than that, or if I want to have like a flashy release. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be cool. The 90s are in the zeitgeist at the moment. Amy says, "Living my dark 90s dream finally. Can't wait." Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like 90s are in the zeitgeist. There's Happy 99 that's crowdfunding now, and Lost Bay, Eco's the Lost Bay, which has like similar tones. Um, I think I think people are ready for or people want more 90s set stuff. So I think it's going to be really cool. And I'm excited about doing the aesthetics for it. I've got I think what I'm going to do, what I did for the cover, the cover that I'm working on, um, I'm going to do a lot of photo bashing. So I'm taking photos, like stock photos, and I'm going to warp and twist them and strip out all the color and add extra grunge and stuff, um, just to give that like 90s style grunge. So I think that's going to be cool, and the layout is going to be a lot of fun to do, to push it but not push it too far, like have it look interesting but also not but also readable, and make sure that the people can understand what's going on. Right, I think I'm coming up to about an hour of just talking bullshit. But so yeah, let me know. Noah says that sounds cool. Getting some good feedback about Midnight of the Century, or my plans for it. So um, yeah, keep an eye out for that. I'll be talking about it more here and on YouTube, on Twitter. Yeah, so I'm wrapping it up. Essentially, what I'm trying to say. So follow me at by Odin's Beard RPG on here, TikTok, or on Twitter, Instagram, and yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like what your ideal '90s set serial killer game would have. But yeah, thanks for coming along. Thanks for popping in and saying hello, coming into the chat. I think this will be saved to my TikTok archive. So if you want to watch it back, then please do. All right. Thanks, everyone. And I'll see you next time.